Krista Pike is the youngest woman in America to be sentenced to death. If she is executed, she would be the first woman put to death in Tennessee in more than 200 years. Krista Pike was born in Beckley, West Virginia. From the moment her mother found out she was pregnant, she decided she wasn't going to care for her. Because of her mother's actions during pregnancy, Krista suffered damage to her frontal lobe and experienced seizures while growing up. After she was born, she was severely neglected. To give an idea of how extreme the situation was, as a little girl, she would play with dog feces instead of toys. Her house was filthy and her mother didn't care. When Krista was only 2 years old, her parents got divorced. However, even when she stayed with her father instead of her mother, she was still treated as if she didn't matter. To this day, Krista bears visible scars from the things her father did to her. In short, her mother was horrible, her father was horrible, and her grandparents were no better. The neglect she experienced only worsened as she got older. At 12 years old, Krista was sexually assaulted by a man and reported it to the police. Although the man pled guilty, Krista's mother blamed her for the situation and accused her of lying. By age 13, Krista was dependent on substances and was suffering from repeated assaults. At 15, she was sent to juvenile detention. By 16, she was released, dropped out of school, struggled with depression, and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Krista's upbringing was truly horrible, one of the worst. She had no stability, no safety, and absolutely no love. At 18, Krista joined a youth program called Job Corps in Knoxville, Tennessee. This program was designed for individuals aged 16 to 24, helping them get their lives back on track, both socially and academically. It was at Job Corps that Krista met 17-year-old Tadarrell Shipp. They had a lot in common. Both had taken the wrong path in life, dropped out of school, associated with the wrong people, regularly used substances, and had previous criminal records. They also shared a deep interest in Satanism. Tadarrell ended up at Job Corps because his mother hoped it would give him a fresh start. When he met Krista, he said, "I've seen you before. I've seen you in my dreams. You are the girl of my dreams." Krista responded, "Great, I think so too." They quickly fell in love, and soon their relationship became an obsession. Tadarrell had a menacing presence, violent, aggressive, and intimidating. However, to Krista, he was kind. She found it endearing that he was cruel to everyone but her, and she was deeply infatuated. Then a complication arose. 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer. From the moment Krista met Colleen, she harbored resentment toward her. Colleen became entangled in teenage drama, and by Thanksgiving break in 1994, things escalated. Krista went home for the break while Colleen and Tadarrell stayed at Job Corps. When Krista returned, she noticed that Colleen and Tadarrell seemed closer, which enraged her. Krista, obsessed with Tadarrell to a toxic degree, convinced herself that Colleen was trying to steal her boyfriend. Her jealousy turned into a deep, uncontrollable rage. Krista made it her mission to torment Colleen. She went out of her way to bully, insult, and threaten her. The amount of time and effort Krista spent trying to ruin Colleen's life was ridiculous. By January 1995, Krista, Tadarrell, and their friend, 18-year-old Shadala Peterson, decided to act. On January 12th, they lured Colleen off campus, telling her they were going to Blockbuster to rent a movie. As the four of them walked together, Krista suggested they take a shortcut through the woods in the dark. Once they were in a secluded area, Krista attacked Colleen, striking her face, smashing her head against hard surfaces, and breaking her nose. Tadarrell joined in, and together, they used all their strength to hurt Colleen. Krista then pulled out a box cutter and, along with Tadarrell, inflicted over 300 wounds on Colleen's body. They used a meat cleaver and a piece of concrete to torture her. The attack lasted 45 minutes, so brutal that Colleen's skull caved in, and a piece of it fell out. Tragically, Colleen lost her life that night. After the murder, Krista disposed of Colleen's body in the bushes. She picked up the piece of skull that had fallen out, put it in her pocket, and returned to campus, bragging to classmates about what she had done. Around 11 p.m., Krista went straight to a friend's room, singing, dancing, and confessing to the murder. She even showed off the piece of Colleen's skull as proof. The next day, she continued showing it to others, displaying not a single ounce of remorse. Within 36 hours, Krista, Tadarrell, and Shadala were arrested after Colleen's body was found. Krista gave a full confession, detailing every aspect of the crime without hesitation. Tadaril and Shadala also admitted to their involvement. Because Shadala cooperated fully with authorities, providing critical details, she was given immunity and received no prison time. Tadaril was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. At Krista's trial, her defense team tried to use her traumatic upbringing as an excuse. However, as tragic as her life had been, it did not justify taking someone else's. Krista Pike was found guilty and sentenced to death by electrocution, making her the youngest woman in America to receive a death sentence. She also received an additional 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder. Following her conviction, Krista wrote a disturbing letter to Tadaril, which is publicly available. Since then, she has participated in multiple interviews, appealing her sentence and arguing that she does not deserve to die. As of May 2024, the state of Tennessee has not set an execution date for Krista Pike. Whether or not she will be executed remains uncertain. This is yet another tragic case, a young life taken for no reason. Let me know if you've heard of this case before and what your thoughts are. That's it for today. I hope you're all having a great day, and if not, do something to make it better. See you in the next video. He's known as the Brain Eater and the most dangerous prisoner in the UK. Robert Maudsley holds the world record for the longest time spent in solitary confinement, 46 years. They keep him in a glass cage underground, behind 17 locked doors, because he's considered extremely dangerous. Just a quick warning before we get into the details of this case. We will be discussing the abuse and essay of children. Robert Maudsley and his siblings were removed from their parents' custody when Robert was only 6 months old due to severe neglect and abuse. They were placed in an orphanage, which, despite the circumstances, was actually a happy time for them. It was the first time they had ever been treated well. This was the only life Robert knew, as he had been taken from his parents as a baby. But when Robert turned 9, his parents suddenly decided they wanted their children back. To Robert, these people were complete strangers. Worse, they were still neglectful and abusive. The house was filthy, and Robert suffered the worst of his father George's abuse because he always tried to protect his siblings. George Maudsley was a monster. He began to essay 9-year-old Robert. Then, within just 1 year of living with his parents again, Robert was either removed from their custody once more or was sent back to the orphanage by them. By the age of 16, Robert was alone, living on the streets. He turned to substances and S-work just to survive. At some point during this time, he was SA'd again. Robert was deeply depressed and struggled with his mental health. He actively sought help and was in and out of various psychiatric facilities. He repeatedly told doctors that he was hearing voices telling him to kill his parents, but no one did anything. Then, in March 1974, Robert, now 20 years old, was with a client, 30-year-old John Farrell. They were in bed when, out of nowhere, John got up, went to his dresser, and pulled out a stack of photos. He showed them to Robert. These photos depicted John S.A.ing multiple children. Perhaps because Robert was homeless and an S-worker, John assumed he would be okay with it. But instead, Robert was instantly transported back to his own childhood trauma. He snapped and he killed John. Afterwards, he didn't even try to cover it up. The 20-year-old walked straight to the police and turned himself in. However, Robert was deemed unfit to stand trial due to insanity. Instead, he was sent to the UK's first-ever asylum for the criminally insane. He lived there for several years but made it very clear that he despised people who committed SA crimes, especially against children. Then, in 1977, at age 23, Robert met another patient at the psychiatric facility. David was a convicted PDF file whom Robert hated. He reminded him of his father, the very man the voices in Robert's head told him to kill. Robert told another patient about his plan to kill David. That patient agreed to help. They began plotting. Robert stole a plastic spoon from the kitchen and filed down the handle into a sharp weapon. By the way, the other patient who was helping Robert was also named David. To make this easier, I'll just call him Other Patient. One day, when the three men were alone, Robert locked them in a room. He and his accomplice attacked David. It was a brutal, vicious assault that lasted 9 hours. During this time, hospital staff desperately tried to get into the room. This was supposed to be a high-security mental health hospital, but after 9 relentless hours, David died. Afterwards, Robert calmly opened the door and walked out, like nothing had happened. The scene inside the room was horrific. The staff could barely comprehend what they were looking at. Due to the extreme state of David's body, a rumor spread that Robert had eaten his brain. The media ran with it, and the name Brain Eater stuck. Although Robert had previously been deemed unfit to stand trial, this time was different. This crime had happened inside a psychiatric hospital. He was now considered fit to stand trial and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He was sent to a real prison, and as fate would have it, this particular prison housed a significant number of criminals convicted of SA offenses, and we already know how Robert felt about them. Within a year of arriving, Robert, still hearing voices, began planning another attack. Once again, he got his hands on a plastic spoon and sharpened the handle. He lured an inmate named Leslie Darwood into his cell. Darwood was in prison for the death of his wife, but he was also a registered SA offender. Robert attacked him with the makeshift weapon. After it was done, Robert shoved Darwood's body under his bed, cleaned himself up, and went looking for another victim because he wasn't finished. He entered the cell of another inmate, William Roberts, a convicted child SA offender. Robert attacked him in a frenzy. When it was over, he didn't try to cover anything up later. Once again, Robert showed no remorse. In his mind, eliminating those who had harmed children was doing the world a favor. But this time, the authorities decided he was simply too dangerous to be around other inmates. At just 25 years old, Robert Maudsley was placed in solitary confinement, a punishment where a prisoner is locked in a small, dark cell with no human interaction for an indefinite period. Solitary confinement is widely known to severely affect the human mind. Extended isolation can drive a person to extreme psychological distress. Despite its controversy, it is still commonly used today. Eventually, the prison built a custom solitary confinement cell, specifically for Robert. It is a tiny glass cage, underground, where he can be monitored 24/7. He gets no privacy. To reach his cell, one must pass through 17 locked doors. His bed is a concrete slab. He receives no sunlight. He is completely isolated. Even the prison guards are not allowed to speak to him. The last known photo of Robert was taken in the 1980s. Since then, there have been no publicly documented images of him or his underground prison cell. What we do know is that the glass prison cell for Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs was inspired by Robert Maudsley's real-life confinement. For decades, Robert has repeatedly requested to be released from solitary confinement, but every appeal has been denied. To this day, right at this very moment, Robert Maudsley is still in solitary confinement. He was only 25 years old when he was placed in isolation. Today, he is 71. He has been in solitary for 46 years, making him the longest-serving solitary confinement prisoner in the world. At one point, the prison allowed him to have a TV and a PlayStation, but then, without explanation, they took them away. A very recent update from this month reveals that Robert has given up hope. He is currently on a hunger strike. Have you ever heard of this case before? When I first read about it, my jaw was on the floor. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And while you're there, tell me, what case should I cover next?